I'm Mike Costello, and in the next few minutes, Dr. Iris Freelander and I would like to talk to you about letting go of hurt feelings. All of us have experiences in our life that cause us hurts and pain, some of us more and some of us less. But at every time in our lives, and at different times in all of our lives, we are faced with this issue of hurt feelings. And the ability to let go of those feelings and to overcome them is tremendously important for our mental, our physical, and our spiritual health. So I guess to begin with, we should probably talk about the fact that feelings are good in and of themselves, aren't they, Iris?
Yes, and hurt feelings are not altogether all bad because it helps us have a balance. But it's so non-productive, and we wonder why people can carry hurt feelings on for years and years and years. At the moment, it might be used in a positive way, because then we can go apologize to someone or allow them to apologize to us. But it's interesting, isn't it, how people carry on their hurt feelings for ever so long?
It is. And of course, as we hold on to hurt feelings, then we relive the hurt. And the hurt becomes deeper and deeper in our life, doesn't it?
Yes, and I've heard you say in your lectures very often that people don't even know how they hurt someone, but someone has a hurt feeling syndrome for years and years, and the person who hurt their feelings never realized they were hurting it all that much and totally forgot about the incident. So we can just, it's if we could explain to our audience how they can avoid hurt feelings, how they can avoid that, and still have the benefit, which the impetus that it gives toward a change in our living.
Well, I guess a beginning point to looking at how our feelings get hurt relates to how we feel about other people and what it is we believe that they're doing. And in most cases, with some exceptions, but in most cases, people don't set out to hurt us. They may say something or do something that is a response to something that has taken place in our life or in their life or in the experience that we're sharing, or they may be responding to something that we don't know nothing about. But for the most part, people are not setting out to hurt us. And one of the ways I think that we need to begin to deal with the look at hurt feelings is that many of us have hurts and our feelings are hurt from childhood. And things that our parents did or our brothers and sisters did or that our family did or aunts and uncles. And one of the things that we say so often in our counseling and in our help work that we do with people who are dealing with hurts is to reinforce the reality that parents, especially, and siblings are going through their own life experiences and for the most part are not setting out to hurt us, yeah, even though they do sometimes.
Yes, and I found that with my own children, I have a lot of regrets on how I handled certain situations in their lives. But it's like one of my sons pointed out to me, you did the best you could, and I never thought you were deficient as a mother. And that was encouraging to hear because we can look back on our lives and see how we really could have helped others more, but that's life. And we can't spend our time in regret, and we can't spend our time regretting incidents where other people have hurt us. But don't you think that when someone's feeling is hurt, it's because of their own self-image? They have a poor self-image in that respect, and then when someone says something rather innocently, then they pick up on it and use it to flagellate themselves rather than the person trying to do that to them.
That's an absolute true example, and that is the issue of self-esteem and self-worth is really what opens most of us up to being hurt.
Yes.
It's a little bit like if someone says to me, well, you're the stupidest person that I've ever seen. Now, if I believe that I am or that I could be, or I take that to heart because of the image that I have of myself, then that hurt is more damaging and I'm more open and receptive to it. Part of the problem is that from early life, many of us in our childhood, going back again to that, or in our adult life and in our relationships, many marriages and relationships between friends are built upon one part or one person of the relationship continually reinforcing the lack of self-esteem and self-value of the other person to the point that that individual begins to believe the things about themselves that are not true.
Well, a good spiritual core within each individual is the best insurance against allowing that to affect our lives. Because if we truly believe we are part of God, we are co-creators with Creator God, we are a child of God. We, you know, different people phrase it different ways, but there's that connectiveness with God, and there's the connectiveness with all people, that we are all one. And if we do look at life in that way from a spiritual standpoint, then you know that we're really ahead of the game in not holding on to hurt feelings, because we can realize where people are coming from instead of just being hurt. We can see what they were thinking, because we realize that we've hurt other people and that we have often hurt ourselves just from misunderstandings.
Mm-hmm. And the core of what you are talking about is forgiveness, isn't it?
Yes, it
and
is.
the importance of forgiveness, and the fact that forgiveness always, although we seem to think that it's something we do outside of ourselves by going and seeking forgiveness, but the act of forgiving comes about inside us, doesn't it?
Yes, from within the individual. And if we don't forgive, we're going to be hurt, and the other person might not even know we're not forgiving them. But we have to, and we have to verbally say to people, I'm sorry. And we have to also say, forgive. You know, it's an interesting factor spiritually that when someone says thank you or I'm sorry, then a light goes from the speaker to the other person. And when they say, I accept that, in whatever way they want to say, I accept that, then the light goes back to the other person. Like if they say, you're welcome, the light goes back. And you can see those thought forms, and you can see that they really do work. And so it's important that we always acknowledge. But those things help to lighten the situation, they send light into the being of the person, and then they're less apt to have unpleasant thoughts about it later.
Mm-hmm. And that issue of thought form is tremendously important. And thought does create form,
Yes,
doesn't it?
yes,
And it creates a manifestation. So
yes,
one of the things that we say so often in New Thought is that thoughts make things, or thoughts are things. And so
exactly.
thoughts, as we think about ourselves and about others, we are creating an environment. We, in a way, become self-fulfilling. And so we are creating, as you said so well, we are co-creating with all of life around us and with the divine presence around us, the reality that exists in the physical life, in the spiritual life, and in the mental or psychological life.
Yes. And they all each impact on the other. And so those higher bodies or realms impact on our physical. And so when we have too much of the negative in those areas, then it will impact in our physical body in some way. And there's not a thought we've ever thought that hasn't affected us. Every thought we think affects us. If we could just remember that, I think we'd be more careful about how we think, and we wouldn't indulge in idle daydreams that are negative, because very often we do, all of us do. But if we can consciously keep our consciousness high, then we're more apt to be happy, healthy, whole, and strong.
And overcome hurt feelings,
Yes,
or deal with hurt feelings, because of the truth that those hurt feelings are negative influences
yes,
and create negative thoughts. And that negative thought process is damaging our mind, our body, and our spirit.
yes,
And especially, not especially, but I think all of us are concerned about health. And you and I and our church talks a lot about health and healing, and the importance of giving up negativity, or limiting the amount of negativity that we have in our lives. And certainly being hurt is a dominant force of negativity within our being. And that negative force, that negative thought process, that negative mindset, and that negative thinking can in fact make us sick.
yes,
And we know that it does that. Scientifically, we know that.
yes. Well, there have been lots of studies made, and lots of people who see clairvoyantly into the human body, and they realize certain emotions create physical problems in specific parts of the body, and they've shown irrefutably that that is so. But that's part of life, and we can't just flagellate ourselves when we find that we've done that. We just have to change our way of thinking, and it will change.
Mm-hmm.
And we have written examples, profound written examples, where people have changed their thinking, and their condition has cleared just immediately, and not overnight, but immediately in that moment. So it would behoove us to not have exercised those hurt feelings, to not exercise any negativity that we can avoid transmute would be a good word, wouldn't it?
Be an excellent word.
Yes, to transmute the hurt feelings into good. And again, as you said earlier, if we can just remind ourselves that the person who hurt our feelings really didn't set out to hurt our feelings. If they did, they're not worthy of our attention. So we don't even need give them attention. But if it's an accident, if they do it inadvertently, and we've all done that inadvertently, because again, we don't know the other person's frame of reference. We don't know what's going to hit them hard.
And also, we acknowledge the fact that when we allow our feelings to be hurt, we have indeed allowed that, haven't we?
Yes.
And so often we believe that because this or that happened, because this person said this or that I have been hurt. Well, in fact, that person said it, but we have opened ourselves to the pain and suffering. It's a little bit like the rhyme we learned as children about sticks and stones,
Yes.
and that those things we say, we allow them to hurt us, but really in truth they can't unless we do allow ourselves to be hurt by them. And I'm thinking about a young woman that I've talked to on a number of occasions that had a hurt in her life. It wasn't a significant hurt, but for her it was. And it had to do with a relationship that she had and with another member of her family a long time ago. And that person has said so many times to me, I will never get over the pain, this hurt. I will never get over it, or I will never let go of it. And of course, that's a statement of what's going on in that individual's consciousness. And that is exactly what she is doing. She will not let go of it.
Yes.
And the reality is that until she lets go of it, it will continue to influence her mind, her body, and her spirit. It will continue to influence the way she thinks and the way she lives and the way she feels. And when she comes to a point of hurting enough, then perhaps she'll be ready to let go and to begin the process of letting go, which is not easy always, but it is something that we can all work on. And we'll spend some time in a few minutes talking about how we can let go and begin the process of letting go. But it's tremendously important that we understand that it's our responsibility and that we're opening ourselves and allowing ourselves to be hurt and then allowing ourselves to be hurt again and again.
It sounds as if she was really enjoying the pain and the grief of it all. And we do affirmations. You have us do affirmations at the church all the time. So in essence, she's affirming that she'll never get over that. And her affirmation is paying off just like our positive affirmations always pay off. So until she changes her affirmation, she's going to be stuck there.
Yes, she's affirming the negative, and she is suffering. And of course, my thought for her and prayer for her is that ultimately and soon and very soon she will have suffered enough so that she decides, and of course only she can decide, to let go of it and move on. In some instances, that doesn't happen. And I think of another lady in the church who was quite elderly, who was never able to let go of some hurts that she had with her mother. And so those things can hurt us and damage us all through our lives.
Mm-hmm. I remember being so very shocked at one time when a friend of mine said, I hate my mother. And I said, and I'd let her know how shocked I was. And she says, doesn't everyone hate their mother? In a sense, it was healthy if she was able to express it.
And that is an important process in overcoming our hurts. We need to express them.
Yes.
And we don't necessarily need to express them to the one who hurt us, but we do need to express them to ourselves and to someone around us. And there are a variety of people that we can open up to and share in that process.
Yeah.
At this point in the program, we'd like to pause and offer you some information that will help you to continue at home the thoughts and the teachings that we're sharing with you. And when we come back, we'll be dealing with ways in which we can let go of hurts.
We would like to give you the opportunity to explore and discover in your own home the new thought teachings that this program is sharing with you by sending you a free copy of one of these booklets. Simply address your request to Confident Living at P.O. Box 7726, Long Beach, California, 90807. Whatever your dream, whatever your vision, you can reach it through Confident Living.
We've been talking about ways in which we could let go of our hurts. And so we'd like to spend the next few minutes talking about the techniques that we can use to overcome our hurt feelings. And just before the break, we were sharing the fact that we need to communicate our hurts. I guess before we communicate our hurts, even, we need to be able to acknowledge them to ourselves, don't we?
Yes, that would be very important. And to know why we are being hurt, what it is about it that makes it hurt us, because it's always in our own consciousness that creates that situation. So, and we can also remember the words of our great way shower, the Christ, who said, Father, forgive them, they know not what they do. And when we use that modality, then we're giving them leeway, the person who's hurt us leeway, because they don't know what they do.
Mhm. And we begin the process of acknowledging the fact that we have a hurt feeling, and that we want to do something about it.
Yes, and that's a certain releasement, isn't it?
That begins the process of release. And of course, we need to talk to ourselves, and we need to talk to God in prayer and meditation, and we need, in some cases, to talk to someone else. And a good source is a good friend, or a companion, or a counselor, or a clergy person. There are a lot of people that we can talk to, but sometimes it helps us to say simply, I've really been hurt, and I was hurt because this happened to me. Now, a wonderful way is if the relationship still exists between the two people who share this hurt, and we do share it, so that the person that's hurt would have an opportunity at a point in time to say to the other person, I have been really hurt by what you said or by what you did. And I think the important thing in that dialogue that we need to point out is there's not the need to rehash it.
Yes.
There's only the need to communicate how I feel, how I was hurt, and communicate that hurt, and not to seek forgiveness from that person or apology from that person. And so that dialogue really takes place with people who are in relationship, who are friends. But for many of us, we've been hurt by things that have happened in the past, or by people or events that we can't go back and point to. And so for our own personal consciousness sake, and for our own peace of mind, we begin by acknowledging and knowing within ourselves, in our inner knowing, that we have been hurt, that we have this hurt feeling, and that we want to let it go. And then a good way to begin that process is to begin through a process of meditation and prayer, isn't it?
Yes, that would be the essential first step. And if people don't use that first step, they're really short-circuiting their own healing, short-circuiting their own peace of mind. And yes, prayer and meditation would go a long way toward then alleviating the hurt within the individual. And sometimes people need to step back for a moment. Sometimes people need to be told that you hurt my feelings, because then they wouldn't do it again. And also, it's a cleansing for both persons. And an apology is good for the soul. It cleanses. And so the person, if they say, I'm sorry, and the other says, I forgive you, it goes a long way, and it creates a wonderful energy. So I think it's important that we do that.
And it's important for those who have offended or hurt someone else to hear what's being said to them, and be appreciative of the fact that is being shared, and not be hurt by it. Because one hurt creating another hurt, and that's exactly how conflict and war and suffering and illness and disease and death come about for us.
Exactly. I worked all day recently with a gentleman I'd never met before, but I worked with him all day long. And during the late part of the day, he became very obstreperous and vociferous to the public with whom we were dealing. And it was not a comfortable situation. Fortunately, it just lasted a rather short time, like a half hour. And he left the scene for a moment. He came back and apologized. And I thought it was nice that he realized he had been out of place, and that he did apologize, because that went a long way in his healing, because then he didn't have to fret all night long and think, oh, I was really doing something I ought not to have done, because he cleansed, in a sense. Isn't that so?
That's wonderful. And he shows a great deal of maturity by doing that. But he's obviously a person who understands and observes when he does hurt, or when he does act inappropriately. And he probably is, or perhaps not, but he has a reason, or there is a reason behind his actions, and they really relate to something that's going on within him.
Yes, you're very perceptive there, because he had a stroke, and not too long ago, and I think it affected him so that overall he sees clearly, but he loses his temper very quickly.
And yet he's aware enough to recover from that and has an opportunity not only to stop the hurting of other people, but possibly to stop the hurting himself. Although in our talks with people, so often individuals that do have a kind of a caustic or difficult nature will say, I just can't help myself, and yet I don't like to do it. And so they haven't yet begun that process of introspection or examination of conscience, as we say in spiritual circles sometimes. But that introspection is really important for all of us because we want to be careful that we're not hurting other people. And if we are hurting other people, there's correction that's needed for us in our behavior, but more importantly than our behavior, in our thought processes, which create our behavior. And then we need to constantly be looking at ways in which we can release the hurts of our life and the hurt feelings so that we don't bear the physical and spiritual and psychological damage that it brings.
Yes, and very often we inadvertently hurt other people. I remember years ago when I worked in a business office, this was many years ago, a young lady told me that she said, "You were abrupt." I said, "I hope that I don't do what another lady in the firm was doing of detaining people talking too long." And she said, "Oh, goodness, no, I'm glad to have this chance to tell you you're abrupt to the point of rudeness." And it was a good lesson for me. After that, I was more thoughtful and careful to not be abrupt to the point of rudeness, because obviously I had been, or she wouldn't have said it. And we all need to learn, so we need to speak out and let people know.
And you could have just as easily in that life experience been defensive and said, no, I'm not, and how dare you say that, and gone on in your abruptness. And then, of course, the other side of that is that in some cases, that observation of abruptness may have been totally unfounded. But because, again, of your self-esteem, going back to your issue of self-worth and knowing yourself, you knew that you had, number one, had the ability to correct a deficiency if you had it, and number two, that if you didn't have it and this woman accused you falsely, you're not going to be hurt by it. And so it is a process of mind, isn't it? And the dynamic of how our mind acts and reacts.
Yes. Well, that day I told my boss what I had heard. I was the private secretary to a very busy man. And he said, well, you might be sometimes, but he said, I value that because you're not wasting company time and you inspire others to not waste company time. So there's something to be said for that. But there's also something to be said for gentleness and non-rudeness. So I took what she said to heart, and I was very careful in future not to do that. And you can do well without wasting time. So we learn, and if we can look at life in that way when we've been hurt, if we can look at it that there's always extenuating circumstances, and try and see what those extenuating circumstances are, and also guard against doing the same thing ourselves.
And we never know what other people are going through.
Exactly.
We really don't. And I am constantly amazed and reminded in my personal life as people share with me the problems of their lives, the amount of difficulty and challenge that people endure unknown to any of us.
Yes.
And because of that, because of things that are going on in people's lives that we have no knowledge of, they behave in a way that in some cases is inappropriate, is hurtful, and is spontaneous, and their desire is not, and their intent is not to hurt or cause harm, but that's what it does. And it goes back to our having understanding and forgiveness and tolerance for circumstances and situations.
Yes, and that's a very good lesson for everyone to take to heart who might be listening to us and looking for ways to not be hurt. Because if we do that, what you just said, then we're not going to be hurt by trivia. We're not going to be hurt inadvertently, and we're going to be mature in our thinking. And sometimes we just become petty, and we're looking for trouble, as it were. So if we're looking for the right and for the good, then we'll find it.
We will, and we always look for the good.
Yes.
And our thought and our teaching is about looking for the good in the midst of every circumstance and situation. And so in the last few minutes that we have, I'd like us to talk about how we can release our hurt feelings. And I guess a beginning point, after we've acknowledged them and know that they're there, is to go into a time of reflection and centering prayer, isn't it?
Yes, and that would be the meditation aspect and the prayer and then the contemplation. And as we pray, we're talking out what it is our problem is. As we meditate, we're receiving information, and then as we contemplate, we're letting it gel, so to speak, so that it becomes a part of our consciousness. It becomes a part of our thinking, and then we're able to deal with other people in a mature way, in a thoughtful way, and we're not going to be combative.
Right. A good way in prayer, and we use affirmative prayer so often, is to use a prayer like, for instance, that I release my hurts and my pains,
Yeah.
as opposed not. And a beginning point for many people, depending upon their faith tradition, may be to pray for God to help them in this process, and certainly that's a good one, and to ask that this be removed. But we must understand that when we pray those kinds of prayers, we have to prompt ourselves to action in concert with the presence and the power of God. It's not sufficient to simply turn it over to God and say, here it is, here's my problem, solve it for me. Instead, we turn these things over in prayer to God and to the infinite intelligence of understanding and realization, and then we open ourselves to that presence and that guidance. And then as we're open to that infilling, then we're guided and directed, and we go into times of meditation. So if we affirm the fact that I release these hurt feelings and I release the condition that has caused me pain and suffering, and then enter into times of quiet meditation, we open ourselves to be infilled, to be guided and directed in the ways that we should think and the things that we should do.
And to be inspired to do that which we need to for our own well-being. And all that, I think, after we've approached the person who's hurt us, and to say, I don't understand what you were getting at, if indeed we don't understand. Because if our feelings are hurt, 9 times out of 10, the person didn't mean to hurt our feelings. And if they deliberately were doing it, again, I think it's not worthy of our note, because it's a problem within them that doesn't have anything to do with us. And if we can remember that, then we wouldn't be looking for trouble wherever we go.
And our final comment would be that as we deal with our hurt feelings, we need to accept and acknowledge the fact that they are within us and they are our problem, and that we are called and given the ability through the presence and the power of God, through positive thinking, through prayer and meditation, to overcome, to forgive, and to restore our lives in the midst of our hurt feelings. Dr. Freelander and I have been sharing with you concepts and ideas for confident living, ideas for overcoming hurt feelings. We hope that this information has been useful, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
This program is a community outreach of Christ Church. Dr. Mike Costello speaks each Sunday morning at 11 a.m., and Dr. Iris Freelander speaks on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. at the church. On Sunday evenings at 6 p.m., there is a meditation and healing service. Come and join us. You will be warmly welcomed.